The late summer haze in southwest London often carried the sweet aroma of blooming lavender or the faint laughter of children playing in their gardens. But on that unsettling day in September 2017, a sinister, acrid stench cut through the air, raising hairs on the necks of the unsuspecting residents of Wimbledon Park Road. The smoke wasn't the comforting gray of a family barbecue, but a dense, suffocating plume that clawed at the lungs and refused to disperse. Behind a locked garden gate, Wissam Medani loomed over roaring flames, his silhouette dancing with shadows, harboring secrets too ghastly to remain hidden. The morning chill of September 2017 clung to Wimbledon Park Road like a lingering shadow, casting an eerie stillness over the well-manicured lawns and quaint brick houses. People in this quiet corner of southwest London were accustomed to the gentle hum of life, the soft rustle of newspapers, the clink of teacups, the distant echoes of children's laughter. But on that particular morning, a sinister anomaly disrupted the mundane rhythm. It began as a whisper of smoke, a faint tendril curling into the sky. But soon, the whisper turned into a shout, a thick, acrid plume that assaulted the senses and provoked a collective unease. Residents, puzzled and disturbed, peered through lace curtains, their brows furrowed at the sight of the dark, unholy cloud rising from a neighbor's garden. The smoke was far too dense, it scent far too abrasive to come from a mere garden bonfire. It was the kind of smell that clung to clothes and lingered in hair, a smell that spoke of something terribly, irreversibly wrong. The fire department was summoned, the urgency palpable in the operator's voice as the call went out. Red and blue lights splintered the morning's tranquility, sirens wailing like a banshee's cry as firefighters arrived, their boots thudding heavily on the pavement. They found the garden gate locked, a barrier to the horrors beyond. But the smoke, relentless and unyielding, poured over the top, carrying with it a tale of unspeakable dread. Inside the garden, Wissam Medani moved with a deliberate, unsettling calm. His silhouette was a macabre dance partner to the flames, flickering in sync with their chaotic rhythm. The fire roared with a ferocity that seemed almost alive, and the air was thick with the promise of secrets too monstrous to remain buried. Medani's explanation was a flimsy shield against the encroaching tide of suspicion. Just burning trash, he claimed, his voice a thin veneer of nonchalance. But the firefighters knew better. They had seen too much, smelled too much to believe in the innocence of this inferno. As the flames were tamed and the smoke began to disperse, the true horror revealed itself. Amidst the charred detritus and twisted metal were shapes that did not belong. Bones, a hand, a face, grotesquely defiled by fire, but undeniably human. A chill gripped the spine of every onlooker as realization dawned. They were not looking at the remains of refuse, but of something infinitely more precious and tragic. The police arrived swiftly, the air crackling with the gravity of what had been uncovered. Wissam Medani, now a man cornered, spun tales of sheep carcasses and unfortunate misunderstandings, but his words rang hollow against the mounting evidence. He was French, a man of some mystery, living with his partner and their 2 children in this seemingly ordinary family home. Yet, the scene in the garden painted a far more sinister picture. Inside the house, life appeared deceptively normal. Children's toys scattered with careless glee, clothes folded with maternal precision, the muted buzz of a life once lived. It was a tableau of domesticity betrayed by the horror outside. Among the ashes, investigators discovered fragments of identity, jewelry, broken glasses, objects once cherished by a life now reduced to embers. The remnants were gathered with solemn care, transported to a morgue where the painstaking work of reconstruction would begin. The pathologist worked with quiet diligence, piecing together a life from the shards left behind. Her name was Sophie Leona, a young woman of 21, whose promising journey had been cruelly, unimaginably cut short. As the investigation unfolded, so too did the haunting tale of Sophie Leona. Her life began far from this London street, in Troyes, a serene town in northeastern France. Known for her gentle nature and quiet resilience, Sophie had dreamt of a life filled with purpose and warmth, only to be ensnared in a nightmare she could never have foreseen. Her story, now interwoven with the smoke and ashes of that September morning, begged for justice and demanded to be told. Increasingly tense within the walls of a home that had once promised security but now echoed with unspoken threats and unrelenting suspicion. The air inside the Southfield's house grew denser each day, suffused with an intangible weight, a palpable tension that seemed to cling to Sophie like a second skin. The once warm and welcoming atmosphere had transformed into a labyrinth of whispered fears and stifled cries. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant murmur from the street outside, seemed amplified in Sophie's heightened state of anxiety. The house, a seemingly ordinary suburban dwelling, had become a fortress of paranoia and dread, with its windows closed tight against the outside world, shutting out the light and life of London. Sophie moved through this shadowy existence cautiously, a gentle nature now overshadowed by an ever-present nervousness. She had arrived with dreams of adventure and growth, but those dreams had turned into a waking nightmare. Her days began to blur, each one an exhausting cycle of keeping up with the children's needs and navigating the unpredictable moods of her employers. Sabrina's accusations, once vague and passive, were now sharp and insistent, cutting through the quietude like shards of glass. The once stylish woman now wore her paranoia like a cloak, her eyes often darting to imagined corners, her voice oscillating between anger and desperation. Her partner, Wisdom, was quieter but equally complicit, his silence a tacit agreement to the madness that had unfurled within their home. He had become Sabrina's shadow, his own beliefs twisted by a shared delusion that painted Sophie as a conspirator in their imagined drama. The shadows lengthened as the days grew shorter, marking time in a house where Sophie felt increasingly trapped. The children's laughter, once a balm to her homesickness, now echoed hauntingly in rooms that seemed to close in on her. Outside, the garden lay untended, a wild tangle of grass and creeping vines, a mirror to the chaos inside. The autumn winds rattled the window panes, carrying with them the scent of damp earth and the chill of impending winter. Sophie found solace in stolen moments of silence, breathing deeply in the crisp air of the park or losing herself in the rhythmic chatter of the playground. Yet even these brief escapes were tinged with the bitter taste of fear, her every move scrutinized by eyes clouded with suspicion. She dared not confide in friends or family, her isolation as complete as the walls that encased her. As the weeks passed, the accusations morphed into a relentless barrage of interrogations. Sabrina and Wisdom's questions became more invasive, their tone increasingly insistent. Had Sophie spoken to Mark? Had she sent messages? Had she opened the door to strangers? Each demand was a psychological vice, tightening around her until she felt she might shatter beneath its pressure. At night, when the quietude of the house should have offered peace, Sophie lay awake, her mind a tumult of unanswered questions and rising panic. Her dreams were haunted by shadows that loomed larger than life, echoes of Sabrina's voice weaving through her sleep like a sinister lullaby. The specter of Mark Walton loomed large, a phantom conjured by Sabrina's delusions, yet all too real in its impact on Sophie's shrinking world. In the darkness, she would reach for her phone, typing fragmented messages to her mother, the screen's glow a fragile tether to her past life. She longed for the comfort of her hometown in Troyes, the familiar smells of fresh bread and the delicate notes of lavender carried on the breeze. She ached for a time before London, before paranoia and unyielding scrutiny became her constant companions. But each morning, she rose again, stepping into the roles demanded of her with a determination forged from necessity. She played her part with precision, her smiles practiced, her words measured. Inside, however, Sophie knew she was nearing a breaking point. The weight of suspicion had become unbearable, the line between reality and nightmare blurring irreversibly. As the days grew shorter and the nights colder, Sophie found herself standing on the precipice of an unraveling. She was caught in a web she couldn't see, entangled in a conspiracy that existed only in the minds of those who had once offered her a new beginning. In the heart of London, in a house that had promised safety, Sophie was a prisoner, and her cries for help were swallowed by the silence of a city that carried on, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding within. Crackling with a ferocity that belied its sinister purpose, had alerted the senses of those around them. Neighbors, drawn by the acrid scent of charred flesh mingling with the more domestic odors of roasting chicken, positioned themselves awkwardly at the edges of their yards, whispering in hushed tones. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, broken only by the distant wail of sirens. It was the kind of sound that penetrated the cobwebs of routine, forcing those within earshot to pause, to wonder, to doubt the safety of their own small worlds. Inside the house, the couple moved with a frenzied determination. Sabrina's hands trembled slightly as she scrubbed surfaces, attempting to erase any trace of the night's horrors. Wisdom, his face drawn into a mask of stoic calm, gathered the children, ushering them to a room at the back of the house, their innocent questions met with gentle reassurances. The reality of what they had done gnawed at the edges of their consciousness like a rat chewing through walls. Yet, in the bizarre dissonance of the moment, they clung to the hope that their meticulous planning would somehow cloak the true nature of their deeds. They had convinced themselves that if they could just get through this day, through this fire, their reality might bend to their will. The minutes stretched, elastic and torturous, until the inevitable knock at the door shattered their illusion with a finality that was both terrifying and liberating. Sabrina froze, her breath caught in her throat, as Wisdom moved to answer, his footsteps echoing through the hall like a death march. Outside, the officers stood rigid in their uniforms, the blue and red lights of their vehicles casting eerie shadows that flickered across the driveway. Their expressions were those of seasoned veterans, familiar with the darkest shades of human behavior, yet still touched by the tragedy that awaited them. The officers' presence seemed to draw a line, a tangible barrier between the world that had existed before and the one that would follow. As questions were asked and answers were given, a narrative began to take shape, woven from the threads of lies and half-truths spun by the couple in a desperate attempt to maintain control. The neighbors, once mere onlookers, became active participants in the unfolding drama. Their observations, once whispered in speculation, were now voiced with the certainty of eyewitnesses. They spoke of the smoke, the smell, the strange comings and goings at odd hours. Every detail, no matter how small, became a piece of the puzzle that would ultimately reveal the gruesome tapestry of Sophie's final days. As the investigation deepened, the undercurrents of manipulation and control that had defined Sophie's existence in that house began to emerge. Her desperate attempts to reach out for help, the notes and messages that had gone unanswered, painted a portrait of a young woman trapped in a nightmare with no escape. In the days that followed, the community grappled with the weight of what had occurred in their midst. The children, unaware of the full scope of the tragedy, continued to play in the yards, their laughter a haunting reminder of innocence lost. Sabrina and Wisdom, now separated by the walls of their respective holding cells, faced the relentless scrutiny of a justice system determined to untangle the web of deceit they had so carefully spun. The evidence, both physical and circumstantial, was laid bare for all to see, a testament to the brutal reality of a life extinguished too soon. As the trial approached, the eyes of the world turned toward the courtroom, where the final act of this tragic story would play out. But for Sophie, the opportunity to reclaim her life had vanished with the smoke of that fateful fire, leaving behind only the echoes of her cries for help, and the hope that justice, slow and deliberate, would ultimately prevail. The house on Wimbledon Park Road had always blended seamlessly into its surroundings, a stately presence among the sprawling residences that lined the avenue like sentinels. But now, the familiar was twisted into something sinister. Its once warm facade had transformed into a charred monument to a young woman's unspeakable torment. As investigators combed through the remnants of what used to be a home, the acrid scent of burnt timber and charred fabric hung heavy in the air. It clawed at the throat and stung the eyes, a tangible reminder that something unspeakable had taken place here. Amongst the ashes, the discovery of personal items, a purse, a scorched piece of clothing, told a story far more macabre than any imagination could conjure. Yet it was the fragments of bone, bleached and brittle from the heat, that confirmed their darkest fears. Sophie Leona had been consumed by the flames. The officers from the Metropolitan Police moved with a somber efficiency, their gloved hands sifting through the debris for clues that could unravel this enigma. They were met with a grim picture painted not only by the evidence at hand, but by the tangled weave of Sophie's fated existence, a life snuffed out amidst accusations and delusions. The French au pair had been a ghost of herself long before the fire claimed her corporeal form. As the investigation deepened, the lies began to unravel like threads pulled from a well-worn tapestry. Sabrina and Wisdom, the couple at the epicenter of this tragic narrative, were ensnared by their own contradictions. Sabrina's initial claim, that Sophie had returned to France, fell apart under scrutiny. It was a narrative so feeble that it crumbled under the weight of reality. Sophie's passport, untouched and unclaimed, whispered truths that Sabrina dared not utter. In the sterile confines of an interrogation room, the couple's tales wavered with each retelling, shifting like sand in a gale. Their confessions, half-baked and laden with evasion, painted a chilling portrait. They admitted to setting alight the remains of a woman they claimed to have found lifeless. It was an act, they insisted, born of panic rather than culpability. Yet the body spoke differently. Bruised and battered, Sophie's remains recounted a horror story of prolonged abuse. A broken jaw, crushed sternum, and shattered ribs told of relentless brutality meted out over days, not in one sudden lapse into violence. The marks on her body were signatures of cruelty, not the aftermath of a single tragic moment. The detectives uncovered a digital Pandora's box, hours of recordings that served as a damning testament to Sophie's suffering. On these tapes, Sabrina and Wisdom's insane accusations resonated with a chilling monotony. They accused her of collusion with Mark Walton, a man living oceans away, conjuring visions of dark conspiracies and drug-fueled betrayals. Sophie's voice, weary and subdued, was a haunting thread through these recordings, weaving a narrative of fear and subjugation. Neighbors recounted a slender figure seen too infrequently, her presence more shadow than substance. They spoke of screams that punctuated the night air, unsettling in their persistence. Some had tried to help, offering small kindnesses in the form of a meal or a smile. Yet the true horrors remained hidden behind the front door. Mark Walton's arrival in court introduced a new dimension to the investigation. His calm demeanor and unwavering denials cut through the fog of Sabrina's allegations. There was no evidence, none that tied him to Sophie or the intricate web of deceit spun by the couple. As the trial drew near, the Old Bailey became the stage for the final act in this tragic tale. Here, the story of a young woman, consumed by the madness of others, unfolded for all to see. It was a story of delusion and manipulation, of a shared psychosis that painted Sophie Leona as a scapegoat for sins she never committed. Her voice, though silenced, echoed through the halls of justice, demanding that truth finally see the light. The rain fell steadily, an unrelenting patter against the stone facade of the Old Bailey, as if the skies themselves wept for Sophie Leona, the young woman whose life had been so brutally extinguished. Inside the courtroom, the air hung heavy with the weight of justice about to be dispensed. Sabrina Cutter and Wissam Madouni sat apart, their expressions a jumble of defiance and dread, their fate nearly sealed. The trial had been a grueling affair, each day unraveling more of the macabre story that had played out behind closed doors in a seemingly ordinary London home. The prosecution painted a picture of a house turned prison, where Sophie was subjected to relentless torment by a couple ensnared in a delusional dance of paranoia and cruelty. The courtroom gasped as evidence was presented. Harrowing accounts of beatings, starvation, and psychological manipulations that stripped Sophie of her dignity, leaving her a shell of the vibrant young woman she once was. The lead prosecutor, stern and unyielding, stood before the jury, his voice resonating with authority, recounting how the couple's shared delusions had become a sinister reality for Sophie. The defense, in contrast, grasped at straws, attempting to entangle the jurors in a web of confusion, suggesting that one was more culpable than the other. Yet the damning evidence was irrefutable, a testament to the cold-blooded nature of their calculated cruelty. The jury, somber and focused, absorbed every detail, their collective consciousness burdened with the responsibility of delivering justice. In the quiet before the verdict was read, the gallery held its breath. Sophie's parents, Catherine and Patrick, clung to one another, their hearts heavy with the loss of their daughter. They had flown from France seeking answers, their presence a poignant reminder of the precious life stolen. The silence was broken only by the soft rustle of papers, a prelude to the foreperson's announcement. Guilty. A single word that reverberated through the courtroom, bringing a semblance of solace to Sophie's shattered family and a measure of justice to her silenced voice. As the judge pronounced the sentences, a minimum of 30 years for both Sabrina and Wissam, the gravity of their actions was laid bare. He spoke of the unimaginable cruelty inflicted upon Sophie, the abuse that transformed a cheerful home into a nightmarish dungeon. His words were unflinching, condemning the couple's actions as an aberration of humanity, a stark violation of the trust placed in them by a bright, trusting young woman seeking her path in the world. Beyond the courtroom, the rain continued its ceaseless fall, a backdrop to the poignant memories of Sophie as shared by her family. They remembered a girl with a gentle spirit, whose dreams were as boundless as the skies. In the bustling streets of London and the quiet lanes of her hometown, vigils were held, candles flickering in the dark, a testament to her enduring light. Her story resonated far beyond the trial, igniting a broader conversation about the vulnerabilities of domestic workers and the unseen abuses that can occur behind closed doors. The emotional echoes of Sophie's ordeal lingered, a haunting reminder of unchecked power and the fragility of human trust. Her legacy became a call to action, urging society to protect those who labor in silence, whose voices are often drowned out by the clamor of everyday life. The trial may have concluded, and justice in its form had been served. Yet the lessons of Sophie's tragedy continued to ripple through time, a testament to the human capacity for both unspeakable cruelty and profound compassion. In the end, Sophie Leona's story was a reminder of the darkness that can reside in the most unsuspecting places and the unyielding light that truth and justice strive to bring forth. The rain fell softer now, as if the world itself was beginning to heal, carrying with it the promise of a better tomorrow. Justice, like the inevitable dawn, crept silently through the shadows of deceit, unraveling the chilling tapestry woven by Sabrina and Wissam. As the gavel fell, the courtroom air thickened with the weight of retribution, a somber symphony underscoring that even the darkest secrets cannot forever elude the relentless pursuit of truth.